I remember the sound of the doorbell like it was a gunshot. It wasn't a quiet knock. It was the kind of ring that made the whole house freeze. Like the world outside had suddenly decided to watch us. My father was already inside the living room, sitting on the couch with his hands clenched, pretending he was calm. My stepmother stood beside him, holding her phone like a weapon. Her eyes were wide, but not with fear. With calculated fear. The kind that makes you look innocent even when you're guilty. When the police arrived, I didn't understand what was happening at first. I only knew my heart was beating too fast, like it wanted to escape my body. The officer stepped in, and the lead one looked at me with that expression people reserve for criminals. The expression that says, "You're guilty. Don't deny it." My stepmother immediately began to cry. Not the soft, real tears of a person who has lost something. Her tears were loud. The kind that draw attention. The kind that make you feel guilty, just for watching. She spoke to the police like she was narrating a story. "My daughter," she said, pointing at me. She did something terrible. I can't believe it." I stood there, frozen. I didn't understand why my father wasn't speaking. I didn't understand why my stepbrother wasn't stepping forward to defend me. I didn't understand why everyone in the house was suddenly staring at me like I was a stranger. And then the officer said the words that broke my life. "We have evidence that you transferred the money, Mississippi. We have the recordings. We have the witnesses." The world became blurry. Money, transfer, evidence, recordings, witnesses. The crime I was accused of wasn't something small. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a serious financial crime, one that could destroy a person's future. And I had never even seen the account in question. I didn't know how to transfer money like that. I didn't even know the names of the people involved. But they said I did. And because my stepmother was crying, and because my father looked helpless, and because my brother was silent, the police believed her. The officer looked at my stepmother again and said, "Ma'am, we need your statement." She took a deep breath, wiped her eyes, and spoke with a voice that sounded like innocence. "I trusted her," she said, pointing at me. "She was always responsible. She always helped me. I never thought she could do something like this." The words hit me like a slap. She never thought I could do something like this? As if she had never watched me grow. As if she had never seen me work hard, study hard, sacrifice, love, and stay loyal. As if she didn't know the kind of person I was. But that was the thing. She didn't know me. She never wanted to. Because the person she wanted was a tool. A person who could take the blame for her son. A person who could be used and then discarded. My father finally spoke, but his voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "We need to cooperate. If we don't, it will look suspicious." He said it like it was a normal conversation, like we were discussing a dinner plan, as if my life was just another task on a list. My stepbrother, who was standing behind my father, didn't say anything. His silence was louder than any accusation. I felt my throat tighten. My eyes burned. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it." But I knew it wouldn't matter. Because the truth didn't matter in that moment. What mattered was the story they were telling. And the story was that I was guilty. The officer asked me to step outside. My stepmother walked beside me, holding my arm like she was comforting me. Her grip was gentle, but I could feel the hidden knife in her touch. "Don't worry," she whispered. "Just say you don't remember. Say you were confused. You'll be okay." I wanted to pull away. I wanted to scream at her. But I couldn't, because I saw my father's face. He looked like a man who had been trapped in a nightmare and couldn't wake up. He looked like a man who had been manipulated. I realized something then. My stepmother didn't just want me to take the blame. She wanted my father to believe it too. She wanted him to think I was the problem. She wanted him to hate me. And he was already starting to. The police car door opened. I stepped in. The cold metal of the seat bit my skin. The car smelled like rubber and fear. I looked back at the house one last time. My stepmother stood in the doorway, still crying, still acting like the victim. My father stood beside her, looking at me with a pain that was almost worse than anger. My brother was behind them, his face expressionless. I knew then that I was not just being accused. I was being erased. They were taking my life from me, and I didn't even know how to fight back. The ride to the station was short, but it felt like an eternity. I sat there, thinking about all the moments that led me to this point. The nights I stayed awake studying. The days I worked extra to help the family. The times I listened to my stepmother's complaints and tried to comfort her. The times I smiled when my brother was praised. The times I tried to be the good daughter. All of it felt like a lie, because I realized something horrible. They never loved me. They only used me. And now they were going to ruin me. When the officer asked me to sign the papers, my hands were shaking. I didn't understand everything I was signing, but I knew it was a trap. I tried to look at the officer. I tried to speak, but my voice didn't come out. I was too scared. And in that moment, I made a choice I would regret for years. I signed. The paper felt like a death sentence. They took my fingerprints. They took my photograph. They gave me a number. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely invisible, because the world now knew me as a criminal. And no one in my family was going to save me. The first night in the police cell felt like being buried alive. The walls were cold and gray, and the air was heavy with the smell of fear and sweat. The lights never turned off. They were always on, bright enough to keep you awake, like the world didn't want you to sleep. It was the kind of place where you lose your sense of time, where every minute feels like a year. I sat on the small metal bed, my hands trembling, and I watched the other prisoners. Some of them stared at me like I was a joke. Some of them stared like I was an enemy. One older woman sat in the corner, her eyes hollow, and she kept whispering something that sounded like a prayer. I couldn't understand it, but the sound of it made my heart ache. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call my father and beg him to come and save me. But I knew he wouldn't. Not because he didn't love me, but because he was trapped. My stepmother had already done the damage. She had already convinced him that I was guilty. She had already painted me as the one who ruined everything. And my father, he was the kind of man who didn't fight when he was scared. He didn't know how. That was the worst part. Because I didn't just lose my freedom that day. I lost the person who should have protected me. The next morning, the lawyer came. He was a man with tired eyes and a tired face, like he had seen too many broken lives to care anymore. He sat across from me and looked at me like I was a file, not a person. "Your stepmother says you confessed," he said. I blinked. "I didn't." He sighed. "Listen, I know you didn't. But the evidence is stacked against you. Your stepmother's testimony is strong. Your father is cooperating. And your stepbrother, he's not saying anything." My stomach dropped. "Then what do I do?" I asked. The lawyer looked at me with a pity that felt worse than hatred. "You need to prove your innocence. But you need proof. And right now, you don't have any." I wanted to ask him if he knew what it felt like to be betrayed by your own family. I wanted to ask him if he knew how it felt to stand in front of the world and watch them believe a lie. But I didn't say anything, because I realized something important. I was not the only one trapped. I was trapped, but I could also be trained. The first week was the hardest. The officers treated me like I was already guilty. They called me by my crime, not by my name. I watched the news. I watched my face appear on the screen. People in the market recognized me. People in the street stared. Some whispered. Some laughed. I felt my heart break again and again. The shame was worse than the prison. But then, something happened that changed everything. My stepbrother visited. He walked into the room like he was walking into a place he didn't want to be. He looked at me, and his eyes were full of something I couldn't name. Not guilt. Not sadness. Not love. Something like relief. He sat down across from me and didn't say anything for a while. He just stared at the table, like he was trying to decide if he was brave enough to speak. Finally, he spoke. "I didn't do it," he said quietly. I looked at him, my eyes wide. "Then why did you let me take the blame?" He swallowed hard. "Because she made me. Because she told me if I didn't, she would destroy everything." I felt a wave of anger rush through me. Everything?
Like what?
Your future? Your reputation? Your life? You think my life is worth nothing compared to yours. He flinched like I had hit him. I didn't say that, he whispered. I didn't mean it like that. Then he looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. He was afraid. Not of the police. Not of prison. Afraid of his mother. She's dangerous, he said, almost whispering. She will destroy us if we don't obey. I leaned forward. So you're saying she forced you? He nodded. She threatened to leave my father. She threatened to ruin the family. She threatened to take everything. She told me if I didn't let you take the blame, she would make sure I never succeed. My heart hammered in my chest. So that was it. That was the truth. My stepmother had built a trap, and my brother was stuck inside it too. But I still didn't understand why he had never told my father the truth. Why he had never fought for me. Why he had allowed me to be destroyed. He looked down again. Because she told me you would go to jail. And if you went to jail, the family would be ashamed. She said it would be better if you disappeared. She said it would be easier. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Not because I was weak, but because I was tired. Tired of being the one who always gave, always helped, always forgave. Tired of being the one who was always expected to suffer. Tired of being the one who was always alone. He looked at me again, his voice shaking. I'm sorry. That word didn't fix anything. It didn't erase the years of my life that were being taken away. It didn't erase the shame. It didn't erase the way my father looked at me now. But it was the first sign of weakness in my brother. And weakness is the first step to power. Because I realized something that day. My stepmother had built a house of lies. And she had built it on fear. Fear is strong. But fear can be broken. I spent the next months in prison learning how to survive. Not just physically. Mentally. Emotionally. I learned how to control my anger. I learned how to control my voice. I learned how to hide my pain. I learned how to wait. Because I knew something that no one else knew. The truth was still inside the house. And one day, I would bring it out. They released me on bail, but it didn't feel like freedom. Walking out of the prison gates was not like walking out of a nightmare. It was like waking up from a nightmare and realizing the world is still awake, still watching, still judging. The air outside smelled like rain and dust, and the kind of life I used to take for granted. People were passing by, some staring, some pretending not to notice. The guards watched me as if I was a dangerous animal being released into the wild. The moment I stepped out, I realized something important. Nothing had changed. The world still saw me as the criminal. My father was waiting in the car. His face looked older. His eyes looked tired. His shoulders looked like they carried a heavy burden. When he saw me, he didn't run to hug me. He didn't say anything. He only looked away, like he couldn't face what he had done. My stepmother sat beside him, her makeup perfect, her smile fake. She looked like a woman who had just won a battle. She didn't even try to hide it. I stepped into the car, and the silence was so loud I could hear my own heartbeat. Are you okay? My father asked, but his voice sounded distant, like he was talking to a stranger. I didn't answer, because I didn't know what to say. How do you tell someone you feel broken by the person you loved most? How do you tell someone that you don't feel safe in your own home anymore? We drove back to the house. It was the same house, but it felt like a prison now. The walls seemed colder. The rooms seemed smaller. The air felt heavy with secrets. My stepmother walked beside me as I entered the house, and she put her hand on my shoulder, like she was comforting me. You're going to be fine, she said, her voice soft and gentle. We'll get through this. I looked at her, and I realized the truth. She didn't mean it as comfort. She meant it as a threat. Because the only way I could get through this was if I stayed quiet. And I knew she expected me to stay quiet. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the walls. My phone was silent. No messages. No calls. Nothing. My friends had stopped talking to me. My colleagues had stopped returning my calls. Everyone had turned away. I felt like I had died. I thought about the moment when my stepbrother visited me in prison. The way he looked at me, the way he spoke, the way he finally admitted the truth. I thought about how he said my stepmother was dangerous, how she threatened him, how she threatened the family. I realized something then. My stepbrother wasn't a bad person. He was just weak. And weakness is the perfect tool for someone like her. She used him. She used my father. She used me. But I refused to be used anymore. I started to plan. Not revenge in the violent sense. Revenge in the way that matters. The kind that destroys a person's life without touching them. The kind that ruins their reputation, their power, their control. The next day, I went to meet my lawyer. He looked at me and said, "You're back home. That's good. But you need to stay calm. The case is still active. The trial is coming." I nodded. "I know," I said. He leaned forward. "Do you have any evidence? Anything at all?" I thought for a moment. Then I remembered the small things. The things that seemed meaningless at the time. My stepmother's phone. Her secret conversations. Her threats. Her lies. But I didn't have any proof. Not yet. I needed time. So I did what I should have done from the beginning. I became invisible. I went back to my old life, but I didn't show myself. I didn't go to the places I used to go. I didn't speak to people. I kept my head down. But behind the scenes, I started collecting. I contacted people I trusted. People who had been silent because they were scared. People who had seen the truth but didn't know how to speak. People who were tired of being controlled. I started to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I got a small job at a law office, not as a lawyer but as a clerk. I didn't care about the title. I cared about access. I needed to learn the system. I needed to understand how to fight in a world that had already declared me guilty. Every day, I worked hard. Every day, I watched. Every day, I learned. And every day, I kept my eyes on my stepmother. She thought I was broken. She thought I would stay quiet. She was wrong. Because I wasn't just planning my revenge. I was planning my comeback. Weeks passed, and the trial date was set. The court was filled with people. Journalists. Neighbors. People who wanted to watch the fall of the girl who had betrayed her family. My father sat in the front row. My stepmother beside him, looking proud, as if she was watching a performance. My stepbrother sat behind them, his face pale. When the judge called my name, I stood. The room went silent. I looked at the judge, then at the jury, and then at the crowd. I felt the weight of every stare. I felt the judgment. I felt the hatred. But I also felt something else. Power. Because I knew something they didn't. The truth was not dead. The truth was alive. And one day it would come out. The courtroom felt like a battlefield. The air was heavy, the seats packed, and the sound of whispers filled the room like a storm. People were waiting for the moment when I would be proven guilty. They wanted to see me fall. They wanted to watch the girl who had been a good daughter become a criminal in public. My stepmother sat in the front row, her face calm, her eyes shining with confidence. She looked like a queen, like she had already won, like she had already decided my fate. My father sat beside her, his head slightly bowed. His face was a mask of confusion and pain. I could see the struggle inside him. I could see that part of him still loved me. But he was trapped. He was trapped by fear, by lies, by the person he had married. My stepbrother sat behind them, his hands clenched. He looked like he was going to collapse. I could see the guilt in his eyes, but he was too scared to look at me. The judge called the hearing to order. The prosecutor stood and began to speak. He repeated the story the police had told. He spoke about the evidence. He spoke about the money. He spoke about my confession. He spoke about how I had betrayed my family. Every word was like a knife. Then my lawyer stood. He looked at the judge and said, "Your Honor, we have new evidence." The room went silent. My heart started beating faster. This was the moment I had waited for, the moment I had planned for. My lawyer called a witness, a woman who had worked for my stepmother, a woman who had seen the lies, but was too afraid to speak before. She took the stand. She looked at my stepmother, then at me, then at the judge. She spoke with a voice that trembled, but she continued. I heard her, she said, pointing at my stepmother. I heard her threaten the girl. I heard her say the girl must take the blame. I heard her say that her son must be protected at all costs. My stepmother's face changed. Not a lot, but enough. A small flicker of fear. The woman continued. She also told my son to delete the recordings. She told me not to tell anyone. She said if I did, she would ruin my life. I felt the room shake. My stepmother stood up. She was angry now. Anger is the first sign of weakness. She spoke loudly. This is false. This woman is lying. My lawyer asked her, did you record any of these conversations? The witness nodded. Yes. My stepmother's face turned pale, because she knew what was coming next. My lawyer asked the court to play the recording. The judge agreed. The sound of my stepmother's voice filled the courtroom. Her voice was calm. Too calm. You will take the blame, she said. You will say you did it. If you don't, your father will suffer. Your brother will suffer. This family will fall apart. The voice continued, and the words were clear. The whole room was silent. My stepmother's face turned into a mask of shock. My father looked like he had been hit. My stepbrother's eyes widened. I felt tears in my eyes, but they didn't fall, because I knew I was finally free. The prosecutor's face turned pale. The case was collapsing. My stepmother tried to speak, but her words were weak. The judge looked at her with a cold expression. This recording proves coercion, the judge said. It proves manipulation. It proves the accused did not act alone. My stepmother's world was falling apart in front of her. She looked at my father, as if asking him to save her. But my father couldn't save her, because the truth had finally reached him. He stood up. He looked at the judge. He looked at me. And he said, I believed her. I believed she was protecting our family. I was wrong. The words came out like a confession. My stepmother's face twisted. She tried to say something, but my father continued. She forced her to confess, he said, his voice shaking. She forced her to take the blame. And I didn't stop her. The courtroom was silent again. My stepbrother stood up too. He looked at me, his voice breaking. I'm sorry, he said. I was scared. I didn't know how to fight her. My stepmother screamed. No, she shouted. You will not ruin my life. You will not destroy me. But it was too late. The judge looked at her and said, you will be investigated for coercion, manipulation, and evidence tampering. My stepmother's face turned white. She sat down, defeated. The judge looked at me. I am dismissing the charges against you, he said. You are free. The words hit me like a wave. I felt like I was floating. The room erupted with noise. People started talking. Some people cried. Some people stared. Some people looked ashamed. My father walked toward me. He tried to hold my hand, but I stepped back. I didn't want his touch. Not yet. Because his silence had hurt me too much. He looked at me and said, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked at him and I realized something. Forgiveness was not mine to give. Not now. Not after everything. I walked out of the courtroom, and the cameras were flashing. The same cameras that once showed me as a criminal were now showing me as a survivor. The same people who had judged me were now watching my victory. My stepmother was taken away by the police. Her face was still angry, but her power was gone. Her son was beside her, shaking, crying. He looked like a broken man. My father watched them leave, and he looked lost. He looked like a man who had lost everything. I walked out into the sunlight. I took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I felt free. Not because I had won, but because I had taken back my life. Because I had forced the truth to come out. Because I had proven that no one can destroy you if you refuse to stay broken. And as I walked away, I knew one thing for sure. They had tried to bury me, but they didn't know I was a seed. And seeds always grow. If you want more stories like this, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. And comment betrayed If this story made you emotional, or tell me who you think was the real villain.